Beyond Capital offers a thorough and engaging exploration of class subjectivity, presenting compelling reasons for Marxists, particularly political economists, to delve into its contents. One of its main objectives is to interpret the struggles of the new social movements within a Marxist theoretical framework, reflecting the author's deep dedication to Marxist theory and social emancipation. While it covers a multitude of themes and sub-themes, I will focus on summarizing the author's argument and offering some constructive criticisms. In Chapter 1, the author acknowledges a critical silence in Marx's Capital concerning the proletariat as subject. This silence allows for the perception that capital is the sole subject of scientific inquiry, perpetuating a deterministic and reductionist interpretation of Marxism. Moving beyond this one-sided Marxism entails moving beyond capital itself. The author suggests that the direction to move towards is indicated by the absence of the book on wage labor in Marx's planned 6-book series. Rather than assuming Marx incorporated the relevant material into Capital, the author, along with Maximilian Rubel, argues that Marx's work should be viewed as fragmentary, leaving room for further development in the directions he was unable to pursue. Chapter 2 begins to outline the possible contents of the missing book on wage labor. The author highlights Marx's assumption that the level of necessity is given, which determines necessary and surplus labor. However, this assumption overlooks the aspect of rising necessity resulting from the expansion of capitalist production, implying a need for the working class's development beyond capital's valorization. Analyzing needs in capitalism, the author concludes that force decides between conflicting goals, those of capital and those of wage labor. This realization challenges the assumption of constant necessary needs in capital, revealing that the level of necessity is a product of the class struggle. In Chapter 2, Lebowitz begins to outline the potential contents of the missing book on wage labor, highlighting Marx's assumption that the level of necessity is given to determine necessary and surplus labor in capital. However, he argues that this assumption is made only for explanatory purposes, overlooking Marx's assertion in other parts of his work that the expansion of capitalist production leads to the growth of workers' needs. Lebowitz suggests that this missing book could have addressed this by abandoning the assumption of constant necessity levels and acknowledging the rising necessity resulting from capitalist production. He emphasizes that this production of needs signifies the recognition of the working class's own need for development, beyond capital's pursuit of valorization. Through an analysis of needs in capitalism, Lebowitz concludes that there are conflicting goals, those of capital and those of wage labor, and force decides between them, implying the non-realization of capital's objectives. This challenges the assumption of constant necessary needs in capital, and reveals that the level of necessity is a product of the class struggle. Chapter 3 critiques the inadequacy of capital, advocating for the development of the side of wage labor that is absent in Marx's work. Lebowitz argues that by incorporating this aspect, there would be an adequate basis for understanding the struggle of workers to realize their own goals. Chapter 4 proposes a political economy of wage labor, drawing on Lukács' emphasis on the whole and the interconnectedness of elements within society. Lebowitz suggests that in the young Marx, capitalism is defined by the dynamic relationship between capital and wage labor, driving inexorably towards resolution through class struggle. However, in the later Marx, wage labor is seen only as a mediator for capital's growth, obscuring the presence of the side of wage labor in capital. Lebowitz asserts that a political economy of wage labor is evident in the working class's struggle against capital as a mediator throughout its circuits. This struggle emphasizes the combination of labor as the source of social productivity and the separation of workers through exploitation, ultimately aiming for the realization of a communist society. Lebowitz argues that recognizing the side of the working class allows for the rejection of the separation between the economic and political spheres inherent in one-sided Marxism, affirming their integral relation as inherent in Marx's political economy. Top of form. In this chapter, the author appears to depart from an earlier stance of caution and openly criticizes Marx's concepts in Capital, rather than attributing the one-sidedness to post-Marx Marxist interpretations. While acknowledging Marx's responsibility for the limitations of his work, the author fails to recognize the ontological two-sidedness of Marx's categories in Capital. Engaging in discussion with Marxists who support this perspective, such as Cleaver, 1979, could have been beneficial. The presupposition of this two-sidedness allows Marx to focus on one side to reveal the strategies and logic of the enemy against the working class. However, this is insufficient. Recognizing the other side present in Marx's categories enables us to view his work as unfinished and move beyond both Marx and Capital. Post-Marx Marxists, as termed by Raya Dunevskaya, have confined Marx's approach to economic determinism, disregarding the inherent struggle against domination and control. Lebowitz rightly acknowledges that without the workers' opposition to capital, the tendencies presented in Capital are one-sided. However, the workers' resistance forms the basis of these tendencies. For instance, the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, not addressed by Lebowitz, is not merely a result of technological laws, but arises from class antagonism at the point of production. The struggle of the working class compels capital to adopt strategies like shifting from absolute to relative surplus value, undermining its own despotism. Even if we accept the assumption of constant necessary needs or declining value of labor power with increasing productivity, working class subjectivity remains presupposed. Capital's response to working class resistance at the point of production manifests as difficulties in imposing work on society as a whole, reflected in the falling rate of profit tendency. The limit of capital's accumulation is rooted in the capitalist class's struggle, highlighting the inherent conflict within capitalist relations. In Chapter 6, the author's attempt to advocate for the representation of the totality encounters a limitation. The emphasis on totality, inherent in the dialectical method, stems from the recognition that the whole is defined by the class relation, with capitalist imposition of work being its historical substance. However, our endeavor to grasp the totality, often referred to as the dialectical method, must acknowledge that our aim is to dismantle this totality, the very process by which capitalism reduces our multidimensional lives to the totality of capital. While our cognitive process may recognize our class position within this totality, it must also acknowledge that our struggle aims to transcend and overthrow it. In chapters 7 and 8, Lebowitz emphasizes the primacy of needs and, consequently, working class subjectivity, contrasting it with the emphasis of one-sided Marxism on the autonomous development of the forces of production as the driver of history. While his point is generally valid, it does have some limitations. Drawing from Lenin's notion of working-class spontaneous consciousness as merely trade unionist consciousness, Lebowitz argues that the inability of workers to satisfy their needs leads them not beyond capitalism, but rather to class struggle within capitalism. However, he acknowledges that this struggle for material needs is also the process of generating new people with new radical needs that, following Heller, can only be fulfilled through the transcendence of capitalism. Unlike Heller, Lebowitz correctly sees the development of these radical needs as intertwined with the class struggle, which plays a central role in shaping reality and informing the development of revolutionary theory. Lebowitz quotes Marx on the relationship between thought and struggle, emphasizing that theory must not only strive for realization, but that reality must also strive towards thought. Additionally, he acknowledges the role of theorists of the working class in interpreting and articulating the struggles happening before their eyes. However, while theory may serve a pedagogical role, its revolutionary potential, its capacity to contribute to the transcendence of capitalism extends beyond mere explanation. It involves counter-information, the articulation of arguments against those of capital, which is a crucial moment, but only one aspect of a broader movement from theory to practice and back. This movement enables the formulation of political hypotheses, projects, and strategies to circulate struggles and move beyond capitalism. It is rooted in the lived experience of the working class's subordinate role vis-à-vis capital. The author intends to highlight that while rising above the conception of political economy that reduces the worker to a mere appendage of capital, there is still a tendency to exclude from the inquiry anything beyond the immediate class struggle between capital and wage labor. Marx's assumption in Capital that individuals are only bearers of a particular class relation overlooks aspects of life beyond class identity. Many Marxist interpretations, including Marx's own, have failed to fully address struggles against patriarchy, quality of life, and cultural identity, thus rendering the theory incomplete. The disagreement arises in how struggles beyond the traditional blue-collar waged working class are understood as struggles against capital. Lebowitz stresses the need to shift perspective from capital to the wage laborer or working class. However, non-wage laborers are not discussed merely as workers vis-à-vis capital, but as forms of exploited work outside the realm of capital. The key question is to what extent these other relations become important for capital and are targeted by its strategies, as every aspect of life becomes subject to capitalist imposition of work. Starting from the premise that every aspect of life becomes a target of capitalist subsumption, we can begin to address the political question of building forms of organization and promoting the circulation of struggles that recognize the distinctiveness and autonomy of different sections of the class, while weaving an antagonistic and constitutive web against capital.